Jason Statham was never the type to seek out conflict, but the thump of his heartbeat always rose in the presence of injustice. The night it all started, he didn't expect to find himself standing between a teenage boy and a monstrous assailant with lethal hands. Yet that was exactly where fate placed him. He had been walking alone under the neon haze of London's Shoreditch district, ready to enjoy a quiet evening, when a sudden scream from a dimly lit side street cut through the bustle of night. It was the kind of scream you don't usually hear in a city that thrives on a curated, polished nightlife scene. The raw fear and panic cracked something inside him. He followed the sound down a narrow alleyway strewn with garbage bins and slicked by weeks of rainfall. And there, hunched against the wet brick wall, was a frail teenage boy with terror etched across his face. Towering over him stood a heavily muscled man in a black hoodie. Even in the poor light, Jason could see the man's dangerous posture, the subtle shifts in his stance that gave away specialized training. While Jason had come to build an illustrious career in action films, he'd never truly abandoned the street smarts and sense of righteousness that guided him long before the cameras. Without hesitation, he stepped between them and barked, "Get away from the kid." One corner of the thug's mouth curled up in a sneer. "Why don't you keep walking?" Nobody asked for a hero. The teen's eyes flicked hopefully to Jason. Even though the kid had no idea who Jason was, who, beneath the Hollywood glitz, remained an avid martial artist capable of defending himself and others. There was tangible relief in the boy's eyes. The man in the hoodie pulled back his fist, posture turning aggressively lethal. "I'm not leaving," Jason said, quiet thunder in his voice. He stepped forward, ignoring the rank smell of the alley. "You want to hurt him? You'll have to go through me." The tension crystallized with the weight of that single statement. A faint grin crossed the attacker's lips, as though he found all of this an amusing game. But as he shifted his feet, Jason recognized it instantly. The stance of someone well-versed in martial arts, likely a black belt or at least advanced enough to handle an unsuspecting victim effortlessly. The muscled man's fist lashed out with frightening speed. Jason leaned away just enough to evade. In that moment, he had a flicker of gratitude for the years he'd spent perfecting reflexes and training. He could feel the brush of air as the punch missed by centimeters. The man hissed, "You'll regret that." Between the rhythmic drip of water from a rusted gutter and the hum of neon in the distance, the alley swallowed most of the ambient city noise. Every breath, every shift of muscle felt amplified. Jason shot a quick glance behind him to make sure the teenager was safely out of harm's reach. The boy had flattened himself against the alley wall, eyes wide with fear and awe. Jason lifted his hands in a loose guard, the posture of someone who wasn't looking for a fight, but would absolutely end it if it came his way. The thug lunged forward again, this time with a precision that telegraphed years of intense training. Jason parried the blow, pivoting on the ball of his foot to angle the man's momentum away from the teen. Then he shifted his weight forward and delivered a short, devastating strike to the man's midsection. It connected with a dull thud, forcing the air from his lungs. A lesser man might have buckled, but this attacker recovered almost immediately, proving he wasn't just a random street fighter. He whipped around with a hook that Jason barely dodged. The blow slammed into the brick wall, dislodging a chunk of mortar. "Get out of here," Jason called to the teen behind him, sensing that things were about to escalate in ways that could end tragically if the kid remained. The teen staggered, torn between fight or flight, until Jason roared, "Go!" Then, with a final hesitant look, the teen sprinted deeper into the maze of side streets, hopefully to safety. Once he was gone, Jason allowed himself to focus solely on his opponent. The man's eyes were feral, dripping with malevolence. "Think you're the big man, do you?" The words dripped with a false bravado, but Jason recognized that undercurrent of hatred that drove people to commit unthinkable acts. The man lunged again, lightning fast, aiming a spinning kick at Jason's ribcage. Jason blocked it with his forearm, absorbing the impact. Pain radiated in a wave up his arm, but he shifted his stance like he'd practiced countless times. That's when the thug snarled something in a language Jason couldn't place. In the briefest of instants, Jason realized that this was no average thug. This was a black belt with a vile agenda, evidently triggered by something more than petty violence. The swirl of confusion and raw adrenaline sharpened Jason's senses. He resolved then and there to bring this man down, no matter what. The confrontation ended almost as swiftly as it had begun. With the teens safely gone, Jason's determination had doubled. He feinted left, prompting the thug to commit to a forward motion. As the man shifted his weight, Jason planted a solid front kick to his torso. The thug reeled backward with surprising agility, but clipped a garbage bin behind him. Jason took that opening to land an elbow strike to the man's temple. The man dropped to one knee, momentarily dazed. Jason stepped back, resisting the impulse to finish him off. Violence that served no purpose wasn't in his nature. He wanted to ensure the thug was neutralized but not ended, at least not until the police arrived. Yet, instead of staying down, the attacker sprang up with a renewed fury. A savage cry echoed off the walls, the sound of a cornered beast. Jason didn't hesitate. He sidestepped the flailing arms and delivered a precise blow that struck the man's jaw. There was a crack, and blood sprayed from the thug's split lip. Dazed, the black belt crashed onto the wet pavement. This time he stayed down, breathing heavily. A surge of primal triumph coursed through Jason, but he kept a calm facade. He pulled out his phone to call the police when he noticed the faint flicker of motion in the man's trembling hand. Even half-conscious, the thug managed to produce a small blade from inside his hoodie, sharp enough to glint under the meager streetlight. "Drop it," Jason growled, but the man only hissed through broken teeth and thrust the knife forward. Jason dodged and stomped the man's wrist with controlled force. The blade skittered away, lost among the puddles. The thug grunted, eyes burning with grudging respect now. Sirens began to wail in the distance, a sign that maybe someone in the nearby flats had heard the commotion and called the police. For a split second, they both froze, the primal clang of survival instincts overshadowed by the long arm of the law closing in. Jason took that cue to seize control of the situation. He pinned the man's arm behind his back, pressing a knee against his shoulder blades to keep him subdued. The thug's breaths came in ragged bursts. A moment later, the flashing blue lights lit up the alley like a strobe show. Two officers hurried in, the reflection of their badges and torches illuminating the disheveled scene. Jason eased off the man as the police took over. Between labored breaths and incoherent curses, the thug was hoisted to his feet. One of the officers recognized Jason from his films. However, the seriousness of the situation overrode starstruck impulses. The second officer, a steely-eyed woman, surveyed the area, noticing the fresh blood drops and the battered state of the suspect. "This you're doing?" she asked, voice carrying a mix of suspicion and professional curiosity. Jason met her gaze steadily. The man was about to assault a teenager. I stepped in. Though the details spilled out in short form, the image was clear enough. The officers exchanged knowing glances and eventually thanked Jason for preventing a tragedy. They dragged the black belt off, ignoring his muffled growls of defiance. One of the officers turned to Jason. "We've been tracking a string of violent incidents around here. Could be the same guy. If so, you've done the city a favor." As the police car pulled away, Jason felt an unexpected weight settle in his chest. The memory of that teen's terror haunted him. He knew how vicious the world could be, but it never got easier to witness. He headed back the way he came, eventually reaching the main road where the clubs and restaurants formed a glowing strip of nightlife. The neon signs felt strangely surreal after the brutality of the alley. His mind wandered to the teen. Was the kid okay? Had he gotten home safe? Days passed, and Jason found himself returning to that side street. He couldn't entirely say why. Maybe it was a sense of unfinished business. Maybe it was something about that thug's aura that told him this wasn't the end of the story. The police had let him know that the attacker was officially arrested for attempted assault, though a suspiciously well-funded lawyer had swooped in to bail him out within hours. That realization unnerved Jason. People like that, with unstoppable means and no moral code, didn't give up so easily. They often sought retribution. Sure enough, not long after the incident, rumors began to swirl around town about the black belt thug. He was said to be part of an underground circuit of martial artists, individuals who thrived on high-stakes fights that went far beyond the ring. Some claimed they were mercenaries. Others said they indulged in a twisted sense of power, picking on the weak with ruthless skill. Whichever version was correct, it was becoming clear that the man Jason had crossed wasn't a lone wolf. There was a pack behind him, each member just as formidable, if not worse. Concerned about the teen he'd saved, Jason set out to find him. It proved harder than expected, as the boy had apparently gone aground. Jason reached out to local youth centers and charities, describing what the boy looked like. Eventually, he caught a break from a social worker named Elaine who recognized the description. "That's probably Luis," she said. "We've tried to help him get off the streets, but he's been bouncing between shelters. His parents, well, they aren't around. He's a runaway, but also one of the bravest kids I've met." Jason felt a surge of relief to at least have a name. "Where can I find him?" Elaine hesitated. "I've only seen him near the old shipping yard lately. Rumor is he might be hiding there. But you might want to be careful. It's not exactly a friendly part of town. If I'm being honest, I'm worried about him. Something's going on, and he won't talk about it." Jason thanked Elaine, and that night he drove to the outskirts of the city where cargo containers stacked high like a labyrinth. Sea wind whipped through the deserted area, bringing the brine of the Thames. If Luis really was there, he'd be vulnerable. The place was dotted with shady figures who preferred isolated corners. Perfect for covert deals, or worse. What started as a heroic impulse that night in the alley had morphed into a personal mission. Jason felt compelled to ensure that neither Luis nor any other vulnerable kid would be victimized by men like the Black Belt thug. And as he ventured into the shadowy shipping yard, the creeping sensation in his gut told him everything was about to escalate, far beyond a single altercation in that alley. The shipping yard stretched on, a sprawl of corrugated metal containers, silent except for the low groan of heavy chains swinging in the wind. Rusting forklifts stood like relics, and the only lights came from a few halogen lamps near the old security posts. It was easy to get lost there, especially if you wanted to remain hidden. Jason Statham moved cautiously, scanning the area for signs of life. It wasn't long before he found fresh footprints in a patch of muddy gravel, evidence that someone had been through recently. At first, he feared it might be criminals or an underground fight ring. But as he edged around a towering stack of containers, he heard what sounded like hushed voices. Heart pounding, he followed the whispers until he saw a figure huddled behind a row of wooden pallets. The shape was too small to be an adult. Jason took a calculated risk, coming into the open. "Luis," he called softly. The figure leapt to its feet, ready to bolt, but Jason raised his hands in a gesture of peace. Under the dirty, tear-streaked face, he recognized the teen from that fateful alley. The kid's eyes flashed with recognition, part alarm, part relief. "How did you find me?" Luis asked, voice trembling with a residue of fear and distrust. He looked thinner, his clothes worn from rough living. A dark bruise marred his cheek. Jason offered a warm, reassuring smile. "I've been looking for you. I needed to make sure you were all right." Something in Luis's stance softened. "You saved me," he whispered. But caution quickly returned. "You shouldn't be here. They're looking for you." Jason felt that prickle of unease again. "Who's that?" He already suspected the answer, but he wanted confirmation. Luis's eyes flicked beyond Jason's shoulder, scanning the darkness as though expecting a ghost. "That guy who attacked me? He's been asking around everywhere. Says he wants payback. He's got friends, skilled fighters, dangerous people. They threatened me, told me I had to lure you out here, or..." The teen cut himself off, guilt written across his face. It was clear that this shipping yard setup was probably a trap. The Black Belt thug and his accomplices might be circling like sharks in the night. That explained the bruise on Luis's cheek, no doubt part of their persuasion tactics. Jason steeled himself. "Don't worry. We'll get you out of here. Let's go." But before they could move, the crunch of footsteps on gravel sounded from the far side. Luis's eyes went wide with terror. Jason spun to see half a dozen figures materializing like wraiths from the labyrinth of containers. At the forefront stood the black belt thug, face still swollen and sporting a butterfly bandage over his lip. His eyes gleamed with cold, vindictive triumph. "Statham," he snarled, voice dripping with loathing. "Took me a while to track you down, but I knew you'd come sniffing around for the boy eventually." Jason took stock of their positions. The group fanned out, blocking any obvious escape route. Each person moved with practiced discipline. Some wore fighting gloves, others carried small weapons. This was no random gang. These were men, and a few women, trained to kill. "Leave the kid out of this," Jason demanded. He shifted his stance, bracing himself for a confrontation he was certain was coming. The black belt glared at Luis with scorching hatred. "He's my insurance. You see, we're part of a network of fighters who prize loyalty above all. When you humiliated me, you insulted all of us. The only way to restore my honor is to teach you a lesson you won't forget." Luis trembled beside Jason, but refused to cower. "He'll beat you again," the teen blurted, voice cracking. "He already did." A flicker of rage contorted the man's face. He advanced, fists clenched. The others closed in, forming a ring. The tension was electric. Jason inhaled, adrenaline bursting through his veins. There were 6 of them, maybe more lurking in the darkness. He might handle 1 or 2, but 6 or more skilled combatants, all out for vengeance? Even with his training, the odds were grim. Jason turned to Luis, voice hushed yet firm. "Stay behind me. The moment you see an opening, run." The teen nodded, swallowing hard. Then it began. One man lunged from the side, launching a flurry of kicks. Jason blocked and retaliated with a sharp counterpunch, catching the assailant on the cheek. A second fighter closed in, brandishing a short stick. Jason ducked the swing and sent him staggering with an elbow strike to the ribs. But they weren't coming at him one by one in choreographed generosity. They converged in a pack, each blow or kick forcing Jason to constantly pivot, adapt, and parry. The clang of metal containers echoed with each impact. Luis tried to keep out of the fray, but it was almost impossible. In the chaos, he found himself cornered by one of the fighters. A slim yet muscular woman with a shaved head advanced on him with predatory grace. Her fist snapped forward, vicious jabs meant to intimidate. Luis cringed, raising his arms defensively, but he was no match for her skill. Jason, forced to spin away from his current opponent, saw the imminent danger. With a burst of pure reflex, he twisted free from a grapple and slammed a reverse kick into the woman's torso. She stumbled backward, giving Luis a chance to duck past her. The teen was shaken, but not down. Meanwhile, the black belt thug hung back, orchestrating his crew rather than diving in immediately. He watched Jason dodge and weave, measuring each of Jason's moves like a hungry predator waiting for the perfect moment. Several times, Jason managed to land hits that left his attackers winded or staggering, but their training showed they recovered quickly, each fueling the other with a twisted sense of camaraderie. A glancing kick caught Jason in the side, knocking the wind out of him for a heartbeat. Another punch grazed his jaw, sending sparks behind his eyes. Yet he remained on his feet. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow, but he gritted his teeth and kept fighting. The black belt thug finally stepped in. He feinted a jab, then lashed out with a spinning elbow that clipped Jason's shoulder. Pain radiated down Jason's arm, and his defensive stance momentarily faltered. With a triumphant snarl, the thug capitalized, delivering a brutal knee to Jason's midsection. Jason gasped, doubling over. That's when a second fighter swept his legs out from under him. Hitting the ground sent a shockwave of pain coursing through Jason's frame. He tasted blood on his lip. The black belt advanced, fists cocked in a predatory manner. But through his dazed perspective, Jason spotted Luis spring into action. With reckless bravery, the teen hurled a loose pipe at the thug, forcing him to sidestep and giving Jason a second to scramble backward. It was a small reprieve, but enough for Jason to regain his footing. He used a container wall to push himself upright and regroup, fighting the urge to collapse. Each breath burned, every bruise screaming. But the surge of adrenaline that accompanied near defeat also fueled him, sharpening his focus. The black belt clans circled again, slightly winded but still dangerous. Jason realized they were toying with him. This was about punishing him slowly. He locked eyes with the black belt thug. A silent vow. This ends here, one way or another. An uneasy stalemate gripped the scene. Jason stood, battered but unbroken, while the black belt thug and his cohorts prowled in a circle. Luis trembled on the sidelines, his hands balled into fists, mind racing for any way to help. A raw hush fell over the shipping yard, broken only by the sound of chains rattling in the wind. Time slowed in that fragile moment. Jason inhaled through his nose, exhaled through his mouth, ignoring the metallic taste of blood. The black belt thug met his gaze with icy contempt, flexing his fingers. Last chance, hero. Beg for mercy, and maybe I'll make it quick. Jason's response was a slight shake of the head. No words needed. The man sneered, snapping an order to his crew. They lunged in unison, a chaotic blur of fists, elbows, and feet. Jason braced himself, diving into the fray with everything he had left. He grappled with a stocky fighter who tried to lock him in a chokehold. Jason stamped on the man's foot and slammed an elbow into his gut, making him double over. A second attacker came from behind, but Jason anticipated it, twisting free and delivering a palm strike to the attacker's sternum. A hiss of pain and retreat followed. But as one threat receded, another advanced. The shaved-head woman tackled him at the waist, driving him hard against a metal container. Pain exploded in his back, nearly buckling his knees. He managed to wedge a forearm under her chin, prying her off and landing a quick uppercut. She fell away, dazed but still conscious. Somehow, amid the frenzy, Luis darted around, distracting the fighters just enough to disrupt their flow. He'd throw a piece of debris or shout suddenly, drawing an attacker's attention so Jason could land a decisive blow. It was risky, borderline suicidal, but it worked briefly. Soon, the group realized the teen was becoming a tactical annoyance. One of them cornered Luis again. This time, the woman with the shaved head pinned him to a container, pressing a forearm to his throat. Luis's face reddened, terror twisting his features. Jason tried to intervene, but found himself blocked by the black belt thug, who hammered him with a barrage of precise strikes that left little room for maneuvering. Anger flared in Jason's veins as he saw the teen in imminent danger. With a roar fueled by desperation, he weathered a punch to the jaw and seized the thug's arm, forcing it into a painful joint lock. Bones ground under Jason's grip, and the thug's eyes widened, contorting with agony. He bellowed, temporarily immobilized. That gave Jason the split second he needed. He rammed a knee into the thug's midsection, then sprinted toward Luis, ignoring the searing ache in his body. A swift blow to the back of the shaved-head woman's knee made her buckle. She released Luis with a pained yelp. Freed, the teen coughed and stumbled away. Chaos reigned, but in that chaos, Jason and Luis found a fleeting opening. They backed away from the circle, inching toward a narrow gap between towering containers. The black belt thug, furious now, massaged his twisted arm and yelled, "After them!" Jason grabbed Luis's hand. "Run now!" They burst through the gap, feet pounding the gravel as the wind whistled past. Behind them, the crew gave chase, boots thundering in pursuit. Jason kept an eye out for any vantage point or place to make a stand that wouldn't result in being overwhelmed. They navigated an intricate labyrinth of containers, occasionally shoving a stack of crates behind them to slow their pursuers. Eventually, they emerged onto a dock area overlooking murky water. A chain-link fence blocked further passage. The only exit was a battered side gate secured with a heavy padlock. Jason tested it, but it wouldn't budge. Over his shoulder, shadows flickered. The gang was closing in. "We're trapped," Luis said, voice trembling yet still defiant. Jason shook his head, scanning for any alternative. The water lapped menacingly below the pier. No easy escapes there, just a straight drop into a swirl of who knows what. They had to make their stand here. The black belt thug and his allies emerged from the maze of containers, fanning out in a show of force. "It's done, Statham," he spat, spittle flecking his swollen lip. "You fought well. Maybe I'd respect you if you didn't meddle in my business. But this is what happens when you cross the wrong people." Luis set his jaw. "You're the one who's wrong." "You." "Quiet kid," the thug roared. His henchman shifted aggressively, ready to pounce. Jason felt his muscles coil, his breath shallow. He'd push himself past normal limits. Every part of him ached, but he wasn't about to concede. "You want me?" he challenged, stepping forward to place himself between the gang and Luis. "Come and get me." An uneasy second passed. Then they lunged. Fists and feet flew in a blur. For every strike Jason blocked or landed, another followed. The savage clang of fists against flesh and the dull ring of bone against bone echoed across the dock. Jason managed to knock one attacker off the pier. His flailing arms and a shriek marked a violent plunge into the cold water. Another crumpled to the ground after a perfectly executed kick to the side of the head. But there were still too many. The black belt thug, fueled by rage and humiliated pride, broke past Jason's guard with a barrage of blows to Jason's ribs. Each impact felt like a sledgehammer. Jason's knees wobbled, vision swimming. He heard Luis shout something, but it was lost in the maelstrom. The thug raised a final fist to strike him down. That's when distant sirens wailed again. Bright beams of light swept across the dock, and a booming voice crackled over a megaphone. "Police! Stand down!" The black belt thug froze mid-strike. In the swirling lights, confusion reigned. Some of the fighters scrambled to escape, diving behind containers or vaulting over the fence. The black belt hesitated, torn between finishing Jason and saving himself. He cursed venomously and sprinted into the darkness along with the remnants of his crew. Jason collapsed to one knee, exhaustion pressing down on him like a heavy weight. Luis rushed to his side, tears streaking his face. "You're alive. You're okay," the teen kept repeating, half to reassure himself. Police officers poured into the area, guns drawn, flashlights cutting arcs through the gloom. One of them recognized Jason and made a quick call for an ambulance. Another approached carefully, taking in the battered scene. With a grateful nod, Jason attempted to speak, but only managed a ragged cough. In the ambulance, as paramedics tended to Jason's swollen jaw and bruised ribs, he gripped Luis's hand. "It's over," he rasped, though a nagging doubt in his mind whispered that the black belt thug wasn't truly gone, only retreated to lick his wounds. Luis's lips quivered, relief and fear mixing on his face. "Thank you, Jason. Thank you. You saved my life. Twice." Jason gently squeezed the teen's hand. "You saved mine too. Don't forget that." And in that shared moment of battered camaraderie, sirens singing in the backdrop, adrenaline still thrumming, both knew that while tonight's fight had ended, the war against cruelty, exploitation, and merciless violence continued. Yet they had forged a bond in the darkness of London's underbelly, a bond that might just prove unbreakable when the shadows closed in again.